Silence is often misunderstood. We're taught that silence means calm, maturity, or self-control. We're told, at least they're not yelling. But in relationships, silence is rarely empty. Silence is communication, and very often is the loudest signal of all. Because when a human being withdraws emotionally, when words disappear, eye contact fades, and presence collapses, what's happening isn't peace, it's disconnection. And disconnection, especially when repeated, is one of the most painful experiences the human nervous system can endure. Tonight, we're not talking about silence as a pause. We're talking about silence as emotional absence, and why it leaves such a deep mark on the people who experience it. Human beings are wired for connection from the very beginning of life. Safety is not created through logic or explanations. It is created through attunement. Someone sees you. Someone responds to you. Someone stays emotionally present. When that presence disappears, the body notices immediately. Silence in relationships often activates something very old. It doesn't just hurt in the moment. It awakens early memories of being unseen, unheard, or emotionally alone. The mind may try to rationalize it, but the body reads it as danger. This is why silence hurts more than harsh words. Harsh words still acknowledge your existence. Silence says, you don't matter enough to engage. And when silence becomes a pattern, the relationship stops being a place of safety and becomes a place of self-doubt. You start scanning yourself instead of the relationship. Was I too much? Did I say the wrong thing? Should I be quieter, softer, easier to love? This is how emotional neglect works, not through dramatic abandonment, but through quiet withdrawal. Often, the person who goes silent is not cruel. They are overwhelmed. They learned early that emotions were unsafe. Conflict was dangerous, or vulnerability led to rejection. Silence became their survival strategy, but what once protected them now harms intimacy. Because silence doesn't regulate emotions, it transfers them. The discomfort they cannot tolerate is passed to the other person, who now carries the anxiety, confusion, and pain. And over time, the partner who receives silence learns a devastating lesson. Connection is conditional. Expression is risky. Needs are inconvenient. This is how people slowly abandon themselves inside relationships, while still staying physically present. Healthy relationships do not require perfection. They require repair. They require the courage to stay emotionally available, even when it's uncomfortable. Because love is not proven by how calm things look on the outside. It's proven by whether connection is restored after rupture. Silence that avoids repair is not neutrality. It is absence. And absence, repeated enough times, teaches the nervous system that love is unreliable. Silence is not the absence of conflict. It's often the absence of safety. Silence is often mistaken for calm. It looks composed. It sounds mature. It gives the illusion that nothing is wrong. But the nervous system knows better. When conflict disappears without resolution, the body doesn't relax. It goes on alert. Because safety is not created by the absence of noise. Safety is created by presence, by responsiveness, by the felt sense that another human being is still emotionally available. In a safe relationship, conflict can exist without threatening connection. There can be tension, disagreement, even anger, and still there is contact. Eyes stay engaged. Voices may tremble, but they don't vanish. The message beneath the words is, we're still here with each other. Silence removes that message. When someone goes silent, the body of the other person begins to search for danger. Not consciously at first, somatically. Heart rate changes. Muscles tighten. The mind starts filling the gap with self-blame, fear, and hypervigilance. Because silence is not neutral to a nervous system shaped by early relationships. For many people, silence feels familiar. It echoes moments from childhood when emotional expression was met with withdrawal rather than curiosity, when distress didn't lead to comfort but to distance. So the adult body remembers, even if the adult mind tries to explain it away. This is why silence can feel so destabilizing. It reactivates a primitive question we learned to ask very early. Am I alone in this? Conflict, when handled with attunement, can actually increase safety. It says, your feelings matter enough to engage with. Silence says the opposite. It says, your inner world is too much or not important enough to meet. And the body responds accordingly, not with peace, but with contraction. Often, the person who goes silent believes they are preventing harm. They may feel overwhelmed, flooded, or incapable of staying present with strong emotions. Withdrawal becomes their way of self-regulating, but regulation that comes at the cost of connection is not regulation, it is avoidance, and avoidance doesn't create safety, it creates uncertainty. The most painful part of silence is not the lack of words, it's the lack of reassurance, the absence of the subtle signals that say, "You're not being abandoned emotionally." Over time, repeated silence teaches the other person to walk on eggshells, to suppress needs, to equate harmony with self-erasure, not because they are weak, but because their nervous system is trying to preserve connection at all costs. This is why silence is rarely the end of conflict. It is simply conflict pushed underground, where it continues to shape the relationship invisibly. Safety is not quiet. Safety is contact. Safety is the willingness to remain emotionally present, even when it's uncomfortable, so that disconnection does not become the language of love. Emotional withdrawal activates old attachment wounds. Emotional withdrawal rarely begins in the present moment. When someone pulls away, goes quiet, distant, unavailable, the reaction it triggers is often far larger than the situation itself. That intensity is not about now. It is about memory stored in the body. Long before we had language, we learned what closeness felt like through responsiveness. A face that turned toward us, a voice that soothed, arms that stayed. When those signals were inconsistent or absent, the nervous system adapted. It learned that connection could disappear without warning. So when emotional withdrawal happens in an adult relationship, the body does not interpret it as a simple pause. It reads it as loss. The mind may say, "They just need space." But the body remembers something else. "I am alone with this feeling." This is how old attachment wounds are reactivated, not as thoughts, but as sensations, a tightening in the chest, a hollowing in the stomach, a sudden urge to reach, fix, apologize, or disappear. These are not overreactions. They are survival responses shaped long before the current relationship existed. For many people, emotional withdrawal mirrors early experiences of caregivers who were physically present, but emotionally unavailable. There may have been food, shelter, even affection at times, but not consistent attunement. Needs were met conditionally or not at all. Love felt uncertain. So the adult nervous system learns to scan for signs of abandonment. It becomes hypervigilant to tone, timing, and distance. Silence feels dangerous because once silence meant no one was coming. What makes emotional withdrawal especially painful is that it removes the possibility of repair. It doesn't just say, "I'm upset." It says, "You don't have access to me." And access, emotional access, is what attachment depends on. This is why people often blame themselves when someone withdraws. The child inside believes withdrawal must be earned. If I were easier, quieter, better, they wouldn't leave emotionally. Self-blame becomes a way to maintain the illusion of control. Meanwhile, the person who withdraws may believe they are protecting themselves. They may have learned that closeness leads to engulfment, criticism, or loss of autonomy. Withdrawal once kept them safe, but in adulthood, that same strategy recreates the very wound both people fear, disconnection. Over time, repeated emotional withdrawal reshapes the relationship. It teaches one person to pursue and the other to disappear. It replaces mutuality with imbalance, and slowly the bond becomes organized around fear rather than trust. Healing begins not with perfect communication, but with awareness, with recognizing that what feels unbearable now may be an echo of something that was unbearable then. When emotional presence is restored, when someone stays, listens, and remains accessible, the nervous system learns something new. That closeness does not have to vanish to survive. That conflict does not equal abandonment, and that the past does not have to keep replaying itself through silence. This is how emotional availability becomes reparative, not by erasing old wounds, but by no longer activating them through withdrawal. Silence transfers pain instead of resolving it. Silence often feels like restraint. It can look like self-control, emotional maturity, or the decision to not make things worse. But what it actually does beneath the surface is move pain from one nervous system into another. When someone feels overwhelmed, ashamed, angry, or helpless, and they lack the capacity to stay present with those feelings, silence becomes a strategy, not a conscious one most of the time, an automatic one. The body retreats because it doesn't know how to hold the intensity of the moment. But emotions do not disappear when they are unexpressed. They don't dissolve in quiet. They search for a place to go. So when one person withdraws into silence, the emotional weight of the relationship doesn't vanish, it shifts. The unspoken tension enters the space between two people and is absorbed by the one who remains engaged. The partner who is met with silence begins to carry what the other cannot. Confusion replaces clarity, anxiety replaces dialogue. They replay conversations, analyze tone, monitor timing, and scan for signs of reconnection. They hold the uncertainty so the other person doesn't have to. This is how silence transfers pain. The person who goes silent often feels temporary relief. The nervous system settles because the stimulus is gone. But that relief is deceptive. It is borrowed regulation. It comes at the cost of someone else's distress, and the one receiving silence feels the opposite. Their nervous system becomes dysregulated precisely because there is no response, no feedback, no reassurance. The absence of information is interpreted as threat. Human beings are not wired to feel safe in emotional limbo. We need cues, facial expressions, tone, timing, to understand where we stand. Silence removes those cues, leaving the other person alone with ambiguity. Over time, this creates an imbalance. One person learns to offload emotional discomfort through withdrawal. The other learns to absorb it through hypervigilance, self-blame, or emotional over-functioning. This is why silence is so corrosive to intimacy. It doesn't resolve conflict, it freezes it. The issue remains, but now it lives inside the body of the person who was shut out. And when pain is transferred instead of shared, connection erodes. The relationship becomes organized around avoidance rather than understanding. One person manages their emotions by disappearing. The other manages theirs by shrinking, chasing, or abandoning themselves. True resolution requires contact, not perfection, not the right words, just presence. Pain heals when it is held in relationship, when it is named, witnessed, and responded to. Silence denies that process. It leaves one person alone with feelings that were meant to be met together. That is why silence doesn't create peace. It creates a quiet that is heavy, unresolved, and unevenly carried. Repeated silence teaches self-abandonment. Repeated silence is not just an experience in a relationship, it becomes a lesson. At first, the silence feels confusing. You wait, you hope, you tell yourself it's temporary. But when it happens again and again, the nervous system begins to adapt. Not toward truth, but toward survival. The body learns that reaching out leads to emptiness. That expression leads to withdrawal. That naming a feeling risks disconnection. So slowly, almost imperceptibly, a shift occurs. You stop saying certain things. You soften your reactions. You edit your needs before they ever leave your mouth. Not because you don't have them, but because your system has learned they are not welcome. This is self-abandonment. It doesn't look dramatic. It looks like being understanding, like giving space even when it hurts, like telling yourself you're too sensitive, too emotional, asking for too much. Repeated silence trains the nervous system to prioritize connection over authenticity. And when connection feels fragile, the body will sacrifice truth to preserve it. This pattern is often rooted in early life. Many people learned love this way, by staying quiet, by not needing, by not disturbing the emotional climate of the home. They survive by becoming easy to be around. So when silence shows up repeatedly in adult relationships, it feels familiar, painful but known, and familiarity can masquerade as love. Each unanswered moment reinforces the same belief. If I were less, this wouldn't happen. If I asked differently, they would stay present. Self-blame becomes a strategy to maintain hope. Over time, this erodes self-trust. You stop believing your feelings are accurate. You question your intuition. You look to the other person's availability to determine your worth. And the most damaging part is this. You begin to confuse abandonment with maturity. You tell yourself that needing reassurance is weakness. That wanting emotional engagement is demanding. That silence is something you should tolerate. But the cost is profound. When a person repeatedly abandons themselves to maintain a bond, the relationship may continue, but the self quietly disappears. Joy dulls, desire fades, vitality shrinks. Because intimacy cannot survive self-erasure, true connection does not require you to leave yourself behind. It requires two people who are willing to stay emotionally present, especially when it's uncomfortable. Repeated silence teaches the opposite lesson. It teaches that love is something you earn by disappearing, and that is not love, it is endurance. The healing begins when the pattern is seen clearly. When silence is no longer interpreted as something to adapt to, but as information about what the relationship can and cannot offer. And from that clarity, the self begins to return. Healthy love is not silent, it repairs. Healthy love does not depend on things going smoothly. It depends on what happens after things fall apart. Because rupture is inevitable, misunderstandings happen, emotions spike, old wounds get touched. No relationship between two nervous systems can avoid this. The question is never whether there will be conflict, it's whether there will be return. Silence avoids that return. In healthy love, distance is temporary, not terminal. A pause is followed by re-engagement. There is a coming back, a reaching toward, a willingness to re-enter the emotional space that became uncomfortable. Repair is not about winning or being right. It is about restoring safety. It says, I still see you. I'm still here. What happened between us matters enough to tend to. This is how trust is built, not through perfection, but through repetition of repair. Each return teaches the nervous system that connection can stretch without breaking. That conflict does not mean abandonment. That closeness can survive discomfort. Silence interrupts this learning. When repair doesn't happen, the body stays unfinished. Emotions remain unresolved, suspended in the system. The bond weakens not because of the original rupture, but because no one came back to close the loop. Healthy love understands that emotional presence is an act of responsibility. Not responsibility for fixing the other person, but for staying accessible, for being willing to listen, reflect, and acknowledge impact. Repair often looks ordinary. A simple "I'm sorry," a question asked with sincerity, a moment of eye contact that says "I'm open again." But its effect is profound. Without repair, relationships accumulate unspoken injuries, each one small, maybe even invisible, until the connection begins to feel brittle, until silence replaces safety. People often confuse repair with weakness. They believe returning to a difficult conversation means giving up power. In reality, repair requires regulation, humility, and courage. It asks us to stay connected when our impulse is to withdraw. Healthy love does not demand constant harmony. It asks for willingness to come back, willingness to be seen again, willingness to let the other person know that the relationship is stronger than the moment that strained it. This is why silence is so damaging, not because space is wrong, but because absence without repair teaches the nervous system that disconnection is permanent. Healthy love makes a different promise, not that there will be no rupture, but that there will be return, and it is in that return that healing happens. Silence can teach us many things, but the most important lesson is this: love is not measured by how quiet a relationship becomes, but by how willing two people are to return to each other. When emotional presence is replaced by withdrawal, the body keeps the score. It remembers every moment it reached out and found no one there, and over time, that absence reshapes how safe love feels. Healthy connection is not about avoiding discomfort. It is about choosing engagement over escape, choosing repair over retreat, choosing to stay human with one another, even when it's messy. Because real love does not ask you to disappear to be kept. It does not require silence to survive. It grows in the spaces where honesty is met with presence, and where rupture is followed by return. And when you begin to recognize silence for what it truly is, not peace, but information, you reclaim something essential: your right to be emotionally met, your right to stay connected without leaving yourself behind. That awareness is not the end of a relationship. Sometimes it is the beginning of truth.